Hello and welcome to the Textile Conservation Lab of the Minnesota Historical Society. My name is Ann Frisina and I'm the textile conservator. This is the third podcast in our series and it's all about storing costumes in boxes. Now, before we get started, I want to have a very quick note about terminology. There are many different ways to describe costumes: clothing, garments, regalia. There are many different terms. However, in the museum world, we commonly refer to them as costumes, and that's how I'll be referring to everything today. Boxes are a great way to store your textiles. And in this case, what I love about boxes is that you can stack them fairly high on your shelf and use every available inch of space. Also, because a box is closed, it locks out dirt and light and also protects against insect infestation. Finally, boxes are the only way to store costumes which are too fragile to be hung. And this is a very good example of something that's too fragile to be hung. As you can see here, there are tears up around the shoulder area where it was hanging. And the silk has just gotten to a point where it's just too fragile and cannot withstand that kind of weight. So this is something that is suitable for box storage. Now, boxes, as we discussed earlier, come in paper as well as in plastic coroplast. However, we're going to be using an acid-free box today to work with. And here I have a box that's partially set up. The other items you're going to need besides the box itself is a muslin sling or an acid-free paper sling, as well as tissue to stuff your garment with. Now, the sling is extremely important, and basically this is just a piece of washed muslin, and it acts as a way to get items in and out of your box easily. And as you can see here, I have several items packed in here. I have this red dress, and then I have a full christening outfit with the slip and the dress and the coat. And I have 2 pairs of shoes neatly wrapped here. And what I like about this process of using the sling is that I can actually pick everything up at once and pull it out and easily look and see what all the layers are that are inside. Let me move this for a minute. And you can see, I can see all the items here, as well as that there's only one piece here. Now, when you're beginning to choose a box for storage, you have to make sure it's going to fit on your shelf and also fit the textiles that are going into it. And I'm just going to fold this back up here and put it back into our box. The other thing about boxes is that sometimes they come with plastic windows on the top. And I don't recommend any kind of plastic film window on the top. I think it's especially prevalent within the wedding community. And what happens is that the plastic film can be punctured, and if it's punctured, then pests, light, and dirt can get into your box, and so it's no longer a secured environment for your textile. Now what I'd like to do is show you how to actually pad out a costume to place it into a box for storage. Now, before we even touch the costume itself, you must always be sure to check to make sure that you have no jewelry on, because the jewelry can snag a piece of lace or a part of the costume. And your hands must be thoroughly washed and dried prior to any kind of handling, because you don't want to transfer dirt and oils to the piece. And I'm going to gently slide this over here. We have a 19th century bodice here. And prior to doing anything, I want to examine the costume to make sure it's strong enough to be handled. And then I'm going to check out all the pieces, make sure nothing is falling apart. And it seems like we're all good. This is a fairly strong bodice. Now, it's a lovely open front piece, which makes it easier, so I can just open it up to look inside. Kind of splay it open there. Now, whenever we're padding out a garment, our overall goal is to support it along fold lines to prevent them from fossilizing into knife edge creases. And that is the whole goal of stuffing out a garment. It's very easy for these to become strong creases, and then as the fabric ages, it will fracture at a later date. So I stuff it out with acid-free tissue. And acid-free tissue is simply scrunched up like this. It's not any hard or difficult process. You just kind of scrunch it up so that it's kind of accordion pleated and a little fluffy in the middle. And then you want to gently, and you've already examined everything so it's safe, put the tissue down into the sleeves. And any extra tissue I always put up along the shoulder line. The interesting thing about 19th century garments in particular is that the sleeves are almost always sculpted, so it really does help to stuff them out. And now I'm going to do the other arm. And on this one, I'm going to pull it down from the inside. And again, up by the shoulder. So the shoulders and the sleeves of this costume are now supported. Now I'm going to take one more final piece of acid-free tissue, and I'm going to double dip here and do both sides. I'm going to put it up on this side, and then I'm going to fold it up and put it around the other side, so that both side folds are thoroughly padded, which prevents any kind of creasing from going on. One more thing about costumes. It is not uncommon for them to have embellishments or closures that will snag and tear a piece of lace or even a fragile piece of fabric. In this case, we have these hooks and eyes. And so another form of embellishment could be sequins, beads, anything like that. So whenever you have something that could potentially snag another piece of the costume, you want to actually line it with the tissue paper, because in that way there's nothing for it to snag on but the tissue paper. Be sure to align any kind of embellishments, which is in this case these little tassels. And I'm going to fold this piece of paper over. Now that everything's pretty much lined up and carefully supported, I'm going to gently bring the arms in to see exactly how small I can make this, because I have to fit it into this box. And I'm a little bit big, so I want to bring this one over. I'm going to overlay the bodice a little bit, make it a little smaller there, without creasing or distorting the actual textile. And now I can bring this in and this, and you can see once these things are padded, they really do hold themselves. Finally, whenever you're putting another costume in a box with several other costumes, I always recommend that you put a piece of acid-free tissue underneath it to separate one from the other. And a good example of this is in this box, I have an entire baptismal costume, as I showed you here, all the pieces together. So if I just want to pull that one piece out, I can just pick up that acid-free tissue paper and move it on out and not have to disturb everything in the box. And in this case, we're going to put the little shoes up on top. And now I'm going to use my acid-free tissue as a sling and place it in the box. Now it's a little big, so I'm going to actually advance the sleeves over some. And it's a little overstuffed, so I'm going to just flatten it without crunching it into a crease. Make sure everything is aligned. And I have to advance it down a little bit. Whenever you're putting something in a box, it always takes a little bit of adjustment prior to actually being done. I'm just going to make sure that none of the cuffs are folded over onto themselves. Everything is covered up nice and neat here. And now I'm ready to actually close this box up. And I just like to advance this over. And it's ready for storage. Another issue when you're storing larger 19th century costumes like this very long 1890s dress is that sometimes even the biggest box is not large enough to hold the whole costume. And so you have to fold them at the waist or at the train. This piece has a fairly sizable train on it. However, because the skirt is so thick with this very, very heavy velvet, it's very difficult to fold it down there where you have all that extra material. So instead, with this 19th century garment, and it's already padded out nicely, I'm going to fold it at the waistline. And we're going to kind of go up and go over. And then I'm going to move the whole piece down so that it actually fits within the box. Now that I've done this, I have a little extra space. So what I do with that extra space is I fill it up with scrunched up acid-free tissue prior to putting it away. Because once you're handling this, you could tip the box and easily the whole costume could slide to one side. So you don't want to have any movement in your box once it's been closed up and is being carried over for storage on a shelf. Properly storing costumes in boxes is a time-consuming process, but it's a great way to protect them for the long term. Please consult the Minnesota Historical Society website for information on where to purchase supplies. And in our next podcast, we'll be reviewing how to store flat textiles in boxes.